sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Alex, and he is from United for East Palestine. Welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thanks, Sabrina. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So, Alex, we have covered the train derailment that has happened in East Palestine, Ohio. We have been going through that, I think, for quite a while, actually. And I've noticed that the residents in East Palestine are still having difficulty in reference to symptoms, in reference to trying to get some accountability for Norfolk Southern. Why don't you explain to everyone, why did you decide to become a part of United for East Palestine to begin with?
Yeah, so I got involved with United for East Palestine, the Facebook group that was created by Jenna Giannis and Emily Musakia. And the reason I was able to do that was because I am subscribed to the Railroad Workers United newsletter, so I found out about this pretty quickly. I reached out because I was interested in trying to help out with the formation of potentially a mutual aid network to get resources into the area and get people out of the area. I had some experience with that, with other projects like with Standing Rock, so I knew kind of the process of how that might look. So that's why I reached out to them originally. And then I got in touch with Jenna and Emily, and we kind of just became a team. From there, we brought on some really cool, amazing people like Professor Welton, his team at Purdue University, who were the first, I think still kind of like one of the only people from like credentialed university who were running these tests, doing the tests that need to be run, and then like publishing them for public consumption. He filed an OSHA complaint against Norfolk Southern that he sent to the Senate because of them sending their workers into the cleanup without any hazmat or any knowledge of what chemical they were cleaning up. He went with one of our other team members, Aaron Bragg, to collect samples from people's homes because the wells weren't being tested. And he's been doing an amazing job of holding the EPA and Norfolk Southern accountable. So we've kind of built a team that's just been all about trying to utilize the potential resources available to modern society in a way that is actually beneficial to the people who've been impacted by this.
What are some of the needs that people in East Palestine, Ohio need at this point in time? For example, in reference to supplies, are people still able to live in their homes, or are they having to seek shelter at a motel or hotel? What are some of the needs that people there need?
Well, the number one need for people is for the government to stop gaslighting and lying and running cover for the Norfolk Southern and admit there's a problem, so that B, they can be evacuated and have all the options necessary to do so in a way that leaves them financially whole. People need people's homes values have gone basically completely non-existent. Some of it's for people nearest to these. People are being exposed to a cocktail of toxic chemicals that we still don't even fully know what they're being exposed to. We certainly don't know what the short and long-term impacts are. We know short-term people are bleeding out of their nose and out of their ears, having terrible migraines, diarrhea, nausea, flu-like symptoms, difficulty breathing. People are coming down with all kinds of acute symptoms, and we have no idea what the long-term impacts of these chemicals will be because we don't know what all chemicals are being exposed to. We certainly don't know what the impact of being exposed to all of them at once is going to be. And the EPA is doing absolutely nothing to address that and figure out the problem. Everyone within at least 5 miles, if not 10 miles, should have already been evacuated There should already be complete economic support to getting them out. And that should have already been done without question. The EPA can do that, should have done that already, and isn't because they've been running cover for Norfolk Southern.
Yeah, this is really interesting. There have been a number of train derailments, but none of them seem to be as worse as this one in the past couple of months. Um, so for example, people still living in East Palestine, Ohio, are they given any type of a break from employment? So, for example, if they wanted to, if they had the means to evacuate and say, let's just move to another town, at least for like a month or so until things clear up, are they covered to do so? Do you know? Or do they still have to go to work and keep their job?
That depends on the employer. Like, there's no official government order telling employers they have to let people evacuate. And there's also Norfolk Southern has been providing financial aid to certain people within a 1 mile zone from the derailment site, which is, there's no scientific basis for that. It's a totally arbitrary zone. All the data that we have suggests that that zone should be at least 10 miles. And the issue is with that is there's no legal, like, the government isn't doing anything to give people that ability to leave. I mean, you can't. I
Still,
mean, even if, yeah, that's none, zero. Norfolk Southern is providing a little bit of support, but they're doing it in the most intentionally inconvenient way possible. You have to go down to their site. You have to bring out paper receipts. They make it as difficult as possible. A lot of people are reporting that the people who actually work there are trying to gaslight people, tell them that maybe it's all in their heads. There's a lot of problematic behavior with all of this, and that's by design. Of course, that's what Norfolk Southern is going to do. That's their financial incentive, is to minimize and to do as little as possible, while creating the public relations perception that they're doing as much as they're doing a very good job. Which is why you have the CEO always coming out saying, well, we're doing right by these people, when in reality what they're doing right is by their stockholders, trying to create the public perception while also minimizing their costs, and the government is helping them do that.
yeah. So technically, here's what I feel should be happening at this point in time. They should be offered some type of stipend so that they don't have to stay in East Palestine, Ohio, and still go to their jobs, because that's another part of the problem. Even if they do evacuate to another town, they still have to go to work. Like, people still have to be able to pay for food, like groceries, like things like that, right? So they should be offered some type of stipend so that they don't have to even travel back into East Palestine to go to work if they were to evacuate. They should also be offered some type of stipend so that they can have another place to live, at least for the time being. Who knows how long this could take for that town to be fully clear of those chemicals. And then the other issue is, and we brought this up multiple times on the show, I honestly think that people in East Palestine, Ohio should be able to get some type of single payer health care, just like residents of Libby, Montana were able to get after they were exposed to asbestos. And this happened under the Obama administration. Do you know if anybody in East Palestine is even aware of what they could actually be fighting for? Do you think they're aware that they should be advocating for some type of single payer healthcare, especially considering the symptoms that a lot of them have?
We've been looking into the option for the president to give people Medicare for life for this. There's some steps we have to take. We've mostly been focusing on the steps we have to take to get there. So
Okay.
in order for us to prove that there's a need for that, we have to get toxicology, we need blood tests, we need actual credentialed medical scientists to do the test to show that these chemicals are there. We need the data and also the scientific studies that show that why these things are dangerous, both in the short term and the long term. We need to document all of the symptoms people are experiencing, and then make it very clear in a way that cannot really be contested that these people need, that there is going to be a short and long term impact to health that is people are going to experience directly because of this. So that's what we have to prove first. And then once we prove that, I think then we have a solid basis for all of those other arguments. That our main challenge right now is the government has been very clear in its desire to gaslight the people who are experiencing this and run cover for Norfolk Southern to continue with the story of nothing to see here, everything is fine, minimize the story, try to keep it as small as possible. Everyone knows about East Palestine. A lot of people aren't aware that East Palestine and the train derailment itself was not even a mile from the Pennsylvania border. People
Right.
in Pennsylvania are impacted by this just as much as people in Ohio are. And more significantly, that plume went extremely far. That we have now people who are reporting from Ontario, Canada, and upstate New York that they're getting blood tests showing that they're reporting the exact same symptoms that we have found reported in the informal survey that we put out for people in the immediate area, the exact same types of symptoms, but also now they're getting blood tests done and finding out their blood and muscle work is coming up positive for vinyl chloride. So we now are building the evidential case that this is a toxic chemical attack, or essentially that gassed millions of people all across the Northeast. It's one of the most poisonous chemicals, and that's just vinyl chloride. We don't know what else they were exposed to because they can only test for something if you know it's there. So there's all kinds of chemicals that we still need to test for, not just around in and around the area of the train derailment, but all people who are being impacted by the plume. There's snow that's coming down that people are showing has all kinds of crazy chemical properties. We need to get those tested. There's so many tests we need done just so people know not just that they were exposed to chemicals, but what exactly chemicals they've been exposed to, so we can find out what the long-term impacts of it. This is something that isn't just going to affect people of East Palestine. This is something that is directly impacting people all across the Northeast, and in a way that we don't even know. Just for example, vinyl chloride is so poisonous, it's so toxic, that when a study was done on mice, and just quick addendum, I also don't agree with, running experiments on mice. That's unethical in
Mhm.
itself. But an experiment was done by purposely introducing mice to the safe level of vinyl chloride, and after they died, they tested their liver panel and found that they were all underneath the safe level of vinyl chloride exposure, and 100% of them got cancer. So this is a chemical, and that's just vinyl chloride. We don't even know what other toxic chemicals they were exposed to because we can't test for them because we don't know what they were. People need full spectrum toxic chemical analysis, which is very expensive. This is why we've been working with Dr. Galam and her team at University of California, San Diego, and we were trying to get the funds to get those tests done. But at some point, the United States government needs to step in and do those tests because they have the capacity, they have the money, and they should have already been doing this, but they haven't been. And what we need to do is show that this picture is so much bigger, that the people impacted is so much wider than what anyone's talking about, and we need to make people aware of how big this problem is.
Has the governor of Ohio or the congressmen that represent that district, have they contacted or reached out to the President Biden's administration? And I'm asking because President Biden, from my knowledge, has not visited East Palestine, Ohio. And I think that is very not just disappointing, but I think it's very telling. It's almost as if he's basically saying the quiet part out loud, that he doesn't care about the people there. Like, this is like the Rust Belt, and it's not the first time they have been overlooked, that I've seen, at least in my adult life. So I think that I wonder if there's been any type of push from local politicians contacting Joe Biden's administration. Do you know if that's happened, and if there's been any type of response into reference or not they're actually going to make a visit there?
I can't speak to what local politicians have personally done. For the most part, the city council seems to be basically accepting all of the gaslighting that they have been inundated with by the EPA and by Norfolk Southern, and are essentially just sort of. I mean, these people are. None of the people in the city council are qualified really to handle a problem of this scale, or even to have any idea of how to really address it. They're listening to the experts, and those experts just happen to be people whose um, motive is to gaslight them and tell them everything is fine, whether it's Norfolk Southern, who just clear profit motives, or the EPA, that's just become a corrupt organization that serves the
Mhm.
purpose. It seems to be literally the opposite of what it was originally supposed to do. It was supposed to be a watchdog element to protect the environment from corporations, and instead become a guard dog element to protect corporations when they damage the environment. So it's a pretty topsy turvy world we live in.
What are medical professionals saying about the patient's symptoms that they're having? Has there been any report from the hospital or anything like that? I know they've had a couple of town hall meetings. Has there been a medical professional, to your knowledge, present at those town hall meetings to deliver any type of report?
No, well, the problem is that most of the local medical professionals are under guidance from the CDC that they can't diagnose anyone with toxic chemical injury if they're more than a mile away from the site. So there is just so much um, intentional gaslighting and obfuscation regarding this to try and minimize what's happening at all kind of official levels. That's why we reached out to, and or that's why we were working on bringing in professionals, medical researchers like Dr. Ghulam, who is a very respected medical researcher who worked and is still working on Gulf War illness and helped to prove that Gulf War illness was caused by the United States government, and because it's a toxic chemical injury, so this is her kind of specialty field, and she reached out to us. So we've been trying to help her get what she needs to get blood tests, to get the firm scientific backing to say, hey, these are toxic chemicals, these are dangerous. So allow people to gather the data to show that this isn't something that just impacts people from a mile out. This people are being impacted as far, like, we don't even know how far, but there's good evidence it's as far away as Ontario, Canada. So we need to gather that evidence so we can show it out scientifically to show how big the impact zone is and really prove the scale of the problem. And that by that way we can, and the only way we can do that is to get people like you and independent media and people at large to also grasp the scale of this problem. This isn't just East Palestine. This isn't just the area around East Palestine. This is the entire Northeast has been impacted by this, and we need to get testing done to prove that.
Yes, because we've seen these incidents of environmental and chemical spills and environmental pollution in the past. We saw this with Flint, Michigan, where politicians came in and they said that the water was safe to drink. The water clearly was not safe to drink. So that was still an ongoing issue. When you look at Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, similar thing. And then also I did see that Erin Brockovich made a visit to East Palestine, Ohio, because she's very familiar with this type of pollution, this type of contamination that residents have had to deal with before. And they're not alone. This is happening all across the United States. Now, this is probably the biggest case that I've heard of this year so far. But you're 100% correct in the fact that when I watch mainstream media, I rarely see them talk about the situation. And when they do, it seems like there's a lot of gaslighting, like you were saying, or there's a lot of excuses that are being made. Seemed like forever for Pete Buttigieg to even make an appearance in East Palestine, Ohio. I saw other former politicians make appearances there before he did. Joe Biden still has not shown up. And some people feel like the reason why this particular situation is being neglected or ignored is because the residents in this town in particular heavily supported Donald Trump. And yet at the same time, we saw Donald Trump visit East Palestine, Ohio, and give them supplies. How do the residents feel, from what you've been able to gather, about the lack of political support from the current administration and versus the previous administration, which was Donald Trump?
I think it depends on who you ask. There are some people who, are Trump supporters. There's a lot of people who aren't Trump supporters. There's most people who just want someone to do something. At the time when Donald Trump came to visit, a lot of people, said it was, a great thing. But in terms of the long-term impact, it wasn't really much. It was essentially what it appeared to be, which was just kind of a stop on his campaign trail. As to whether or not this would be getting more support or more interest if the people, or more political support if people involved from weren't in a county that voted for Trump. I would just point out that Flint, Michigan, I'm pretty sure is a solidly Democratic county, and they haven't gotten any help. Barack Obama personally went there to gaslight them. So I guess maybe if it was a blue county, maybe President Biden might have shown up to gaslight them personally instead of using a proxy EPA member to gaslight them. But I don't think it would really change their overall reaction, because they're not motivated by any sort of duopolistic partisanship. They're entirely motivated by their desire to protect Norfolk Southern and other corporations that they're beholden to.
Are people being encouraged to wear masks outdoors in East Palestine, Ohio?
Not to the extent that I'm aware. Some people are wearing masks. From what we've seen, nobody should be within like 5-10 miles of this without a hazmat suit on. People are being exposed to these toxic chemicals willy nilly. They're digging it up. They're exposing other people. People are bleeding from the ears. We have people who are bleeding from the nose and from their ears, and nobody is helping them. And we don't the long-term impacts of this we can guess at, but it's only speculation, because these we don't even know what all chemicals they're being exposed to, and EPA has been doing nothing to find out. They've been running over time to tell people that it's okay, and that's just, and this is like the fact that anybody is even there and everybody hasn't been evacuated is entirely because of the EPA running cover and obfuscating and lying to people and telling them that it's fine, even though we have the data. We are a small team of people who were able to gather enough data to find out people need to be evacuated, just based on the reports of egregious toxic chemical injuries and sickness, and knowing that, just with a quick conversation from a few medical researchers like Professor Dr. Galam, telling us what the long-term impacts of these could be, and just, a Google search of some of these chemicals, we were able to see that there's absolutely no reason not to, like, there's absolutely no good reason that people haven't been evacuated outside of just being corrupt and pursuing financial interest. And
Right.
this is every day that it happens. And the story, like, at first there was a social media traction for the corporate media to come in for a week, but their whole purpose is to serve as the PR form for the government and large corporations and the status quo. So they were there to, give people some time to cry in front of the camera and to act sympathetic. But meanwhile, their framing of the entire affair was to protect whatever their particular interest was, whether it was CNN just being there to frame the argument in a way that was already agreed upon, and bring out the CEO to ask him some pretend tough questions, but meanwhile keeping the conversation within their agreed upon rails, and making sure there was no questioning of how this happened and why it happened and what were the structural problems that caused it.
Right.
This train derailment is not anything new. Trains are derailing all over the place and spilling toxic chemicals. The most egregious part of this was they set it on fire. That's, I think, the thing that's unusual about this. If they hadn't set the train on fire, they would have poisoned this town and nobody would have even cared or heard about it. The only reason why people heard about it or cared was because they then set it on fire and created this gigantic, very ominous looking plume of toxic smoke that covered the entire Northeast. That's the only reason that it made headlines. Otherwise, they would have been able to just quietly poison this entire town without anyone even knowing.
That's right. I want to show everyone how you can help United for East Palestine here. So there is a GoFundMe, United for East Palestine Evacuation Fund.
Don't. That's not the one that we use.
No.
Yeah, we stopped using Go. We stopped using that.
Oh.
That's the GoFundMe account. We
Okay.
haven't been able to get them to even send us our money. We have a donor box. I can post it up right now.
Yeah, if you put in the private chat.
Okay.
So disregard that one, guys. Sorry.
Yeah. So we originally were trying to raise money to keep people evacuated because that's still our number one priority. What we found out was that the main obstacle for that was that the government was gaslighting people and telling them there wasn't a problem. So we kind of shifted our priorities in terms of fundraising to help pay for the studies and tests we need to get done to show that there is a problem. And that way we can activate the available sort of government machinations to get funding to people, or to fund like things like Medicare for life for people who have been impacted, to get the testing done to find out how far the plume went and what the long-term impacts of people who are exposed to these chemicals, throughout the Northeast are going to be, and how to mitigate those responses with the ecological impacts. All of that's going to require an egregious amount of money. There's no way we can raise that amount of money. We can raise enough money for us to do the initial testing to prove it needs to happen. And that's what we're trying to do here. Some of these tests cost thousands of dollars per sample, which is why it's such a big price tag. Just for instance, after one weekend down at Purdue University, who were able to do these sorts of tests for much less than what you would do, like if you hired a private company, they're still like $30,000 in the hole just from that. So there is a large need for funding. So anyone who wants to help and donate with that, though, that be a huge help, because we need to get people's blood tests in. We need to do full spectrum toxicology. We need to get that means paying for phlebotomists, getting as large as possible of a test group, so it was possible to actually submit samples. So that means getting a space and phlebotomists, and maybe paying for food so they actually want to come down and get someone put a needle in their arm. There's and find out, especially because we know the area could be as far as Ontario, Canada. We're talking about upstate New York, Connecticut, and the more testing we can get, the more data we can gather, the more we can paint a complete picture of what's actually happening.
Awesome. Eric has already put the link to this in the chat. So far, I want to show everyone they have raised over $3,169.05. There's 43 donations. The goal is $100,000. So that link is in the chat, guys. So please help out if you can. I mean, this testing is really important, and obviously the U.S. government is not willing to pay for it. Surprise, surprise. To help people there so that they can have a case to call for evacuation and give people the resources that they need, because I feel like this is going to be an ongoing issue, because even people who may not have symptoms right now, that is not to say they may not have symptoms later on. And for people who do have symptoms now, that maybe their symptom is only the migraine headaches, so to speak. I say only, but maybe that's the symptom that they have right now. Who's to say that 5 or 10 years from now, they're not going to have more serious problems? They're not going to, start to show like symptoms for cancer and things like that. So that's the thing about this type of chemical spills and pollution, corruption. Like, this can come back years later. So they may not feel it right now, but they could feel it later. So it's very important that they get the help that they need.
Yeah, and I just really want to impress upon you and your audience, this is not something that just impacts the people of East Palestine or the people around the East Palestine area. If you or anyone you know lives in the Atlantic American Northeast, this is something that you face being directly impacted by. If you know someone that lives in New York, Connecticut, or Ontario, Canada, or Maine, who says that they smelled any of these chemical smells, that means they were exposed to them. If you have any reports of the acid rain that came down in your area and the chemical sheen coming from your snowmelt, you're being exposed to these chemicals. Everybody who has any interaction with these chemicals, we're talking millions of people, have been exposed to these chemicals, and we don't even know what chemicals those were. And if we don't get those answers, we will never know, which means it will be impossible to prove. We won't know how to treat it. The only way that we can find out is to get this testing done, and to get it done as soon as possible. This is not just an East Palestine issue. This is an entire Northeast of the United States issue. We don't know how long some of these chemicals are going to last, because when you set chemicals like vinyl chloride and other carbons on fire, they create new chemicals. We don't even know what those chemicals are, because those tests haven't been done to find out what was even released. And the only way that we can find that out is to get the testing done. And as these chemicals go into people's water supplies, into the rivers, into the lakes, they can go as far down all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, all the way through the Ohio River down to the Mississippi, through New Orleans, out into the Gulf of Mexico. We don't know how poisonous some of these toxic chemicals are, because we don't even know what some of them even were, because we are testing for the chemicals that are in the rivers and streams around East Palestine, but it was a plume. So there might have been some chemicals that stayed low while other chemicals went higher. So we don't even know what was exactly in the plume that went over the Northeast. We do know that it was enough for it to have an impact, to have a smell in the snow melt, and to create the exact kind of chemical sheen that was in the snow melt that's now in the rivers and creeks around East Palestine, which is a gigantic amount of chemical exposure. To smell any of these chemicals, you're already being exposed to over the limit for most of them, for vinyl chloride specifically. And if it's in your snow, it's going to be coming, and you're going to be smelling it as long as it's melting, until the snow melts all through spring. And we don't even know what else is going to be into the environment. We need to get these tests done. This is not just an East Palestine issue. This is a very, very large issue that impacts the entire Northeast and possibly half of the United States. So very much an issue that impacts all of us.
Yes, I think people really need to understand this. I want to share this little clip here. Now, Second Thought was one of the content creators that actually traveled to East Palestine, Ohio. I want to share this piece here where he shows where they believe the chemicals may have flowed to. Give me just a second here.
To everything. We have VOCs in our home every day. Plastic products, we have VOCs. There's a certain level. And when they set those off, the controlled burn, they attach to everything. Fabrics, plastics, everything they just attach to. So they told us to throw away, your Tupperware, your plastic stuff, clean all your stuff, deep clean it. But they said, well, don't use chemicals and stuff like that.
One thing that just came to mind, all of this testing is being conducted by
Norfolk. All of the testing being done right now is 100% Norfolk. They are outsourcing it to companies, and they are coming in here and doing it. The testing that's being done, the air testing, is just oxygen testing to make sure the levels are okay. It's not being tested for toxins and stuff like that. I talked to a guy earlier on the street, and he is actually checking these boxes, and he couldn't even give me an answer of what they're checking for. He just says toxins, but they don't even know.
So that part, I wanted to show you that part, Alex, and for everyone else to see this too. These are the boxes that he is referring to in the video. I guess these are posted up around different signs across the town that is supposed to be testing for some type of toxins, but they said they don't even know what it is.
Yeah, because those particular boxes are not designed to do a quantitative analysis on specific chemicals. It's just to flag to see if there's a certain level of toxins in the air. They did this the way they did this, the machines they used, the way they went about the testing is exactly what you would do if your goal was to put on a good face for PR, to say you were doing something while intentionally doing the test that you knew would come up negative so that you could say there was no problem. It is the exact opposite of what you would do if your goal was to acknowledge with a clear-eyed perception of someone who has a basic knowledge of organic chemistry that toxins were definitely released, and the goal of finding out exactly what toxic chemicals were released and to protect people to the extent that you possibly could to get them out of harm's way. They did the exact opposite of that and did everything they could to keep people in their homes, to tell everyone it was fine, to run tests they knew would come back negative, and to obfuscate on the issues and try and paint a face of saying that everything was good when they knew that it wasn't.
That's right. And I want to fast forward here a little bit where they go to the creek right about here. Whoops. I don't know why it does that, but there we go.
Increased scrutiny. And as a response, very early on, the company announced that it would not only continue conducting air and water quality tests, but would clean up the contaminated soil near the crash site, preventing further contamination of the water with a new dam and water bypass, and would be offering compensation to some of the residents of the area. Of course, as with most corporate promises, what's said and what's done are two very different things. In fact, some of their efforts to look responsible are actually making matters worse.
They're airstripping this, which means the vinyl chloride's coming out of the water and going into the air. Don't let your kids ride their bikes down there. I saw a bunch of kids down there watching these guys pump this water. Stay away. it's going into the air. This needs to be airstripped in a container. You see these rain for rent tanks all over town? They need to be spraying and aerating that water in those tanks and then vacuuming off the air and cleaning the air and capturing it. Right now, that stuff's going right into the air. So if you live adjacent to a creek that's experiencing this aeration, you need to keep your windows closed and you need to watch it very, very carefully. And we need to work together to get this practice stopped.
Yeah.
So these are just some of the things that, like, again, like the government is just not telling them. If they didn't have that gentleman there to come and explain to people that the practice that they're using here is actually not safe and it's making it more dangerous for you.
Yeah, that's what I say when I say everybody within this vicinity should already be evacuated, and they know that. But the reason why they don't want to evacuate is, from everything we've been told, you can't run trains through a town that's been evacuated due to toxic chemical exposure. So it's in their financial interest to keep the trains running, which is why they're doing the cleanup. What they originally did was they just put dirt over all of the petrol that spilled and all the other waste that was over at the burn site. They just put dirt over it, put the tracks back on, and started running the train back through immediately afterwards. Because of the outcry, they are doing the cleanup, but what they're doing is they're doing it one track at a time, taking one track out, moving that train track, cleaning out that part, and they're going to put more dirt in, and they're going to put the rails back on, and then do the other side, which of course will contaminate the entire other side as they're cleaning it. They obviously, the thing to do is take the tracks out, clean the whole thing out, dispose of that properly, which they're not doing, evacuate everybody in the area who could even conceivably be injured by these toxic chemicals until they're done, and clean out, do everything they need to clean the rivers out, get a real study of what the ecological damage has been, find out how far the plume went, get the blood tests on people who've been exposed, find out exactly what chemicals they were exposed to, find out how far it went, get a clear map so people know how far this plume went, so that they know, have the resources in place for them to go and report whatever, and get have people out on the ground collecting samples from the sort of toxic chemical smut that came down in the rain in Kentucky, and what's in the snow now and is now coming off and melting off into the rivers and creeks and into the forests and into the Great Lakes now. All of that is testing that should be done. All this is a story that should be continuously reported on by everybody in the media to talk about, because there's so much of this story that's not being talked about that needs to be extreme amount of interest in why Norfolk Southern set this fire in the first place, what the potential ramifications of this are, why one car was burning. They set 5 cars of vinyl chloride on fire, as well as cars full of frozen vegetables, and then claiming that it was so they wouldn't explode. But then why did they set all this other stuff on fire? And also, what reason did they have to think that it would explode? Because everyone that we've talked to with knowledge of how vinyl chloride works makes us think there was zero danger of the vinyl chloride exploding. So there's just so many different inconsistencies with the story. There's so many people who can't seem to get their story straight. It doesn't matter if you're a corporation. Setting something on, creating a fire that harms people is a felony. Conspiring to hide the fact that you're poisoning people is a felony. Poisoning people is a felony. These are war crimes. Like gassing people with vinyl chloride is a war crime. And we're talking about millions of people who have been impacted by this. And there just needs to be complete clarity on what the worst case scenario is. And because in disaster mitigation, you assume the worst case scenario. So what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that a gigantic plume of toxic chemicals was sent out over the Northeast and is going to poison everybody who is exposed to these chemicals, as well as go into the rivers and creeks that go into the Great Lakes, and then also into the Ohio River that will go all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, through major cities like Cincinnati and Atlanta and New Orleans, and multiple nature preserves, exposed into multiple municipal bodies of water, into the Great Lakes, and expose people to a cocktail of toxic chemicals that many of which have been found to individually be extremely toxic by themselves, but we have no idea how toxic they would be when exposed to a multitude of it at the same time that will last for years, decades even, some of them being dioxins, which last for billions of years, last for just as long as plastics. And they cause women to become infertile and major health defects, and they build up in the human body for lifetime exposure being a 1 parts per trillion. And we know that in the soil just around East Palestine, it's been tested, we're looking at 100 times that. And these are all issues that this is a gigantic health issue that affects so many people, and that is part of a much larger problem of total, just like absolute failing of our infrastructure. The train wreck was not a egregious event in terms of, it was not an unusual event. There have been multiple gigantic train derailments just since this has happened. Norfolk Southern has made around $2 billion since this derailment happened. And there's all just around Ohio, a chocolate factory blew up, killing possibly as many as 12 people. Nobody's talking about that. Another train in Ohio derailed, a boat fell over, releasing hundreds of thousands of tons of methanol into the water, with no one talking about that. This is a deep systemic issue. The only reason anybody's talking about East Palestine, Ohio, is because they set it on fire. If they hadn't set it on fire, it would just be just another one of the thousands of toxic chemical exposures and polluting events that are just kind of business as usual right now, which that's why the EPA is working so hard to cover it up and telling everyone it's okay when they know it's not, because to them, corporations poisoning people and releasing all the toxic chemicals is not unusual. They know this is something that happens every single day, which is why they're running cover for them, which is why we need to really show people the true, bring people's attention, use this to bring people's attention to what's actually happening to our water, to our soil, and to the air, so we can really do something about that. And the only way we're going to do anything about it is by coming together, shining a light on this event, getting the help people need here in and around East Palestine and impacted by the plume, but also how do we address the substantive issue of making sure that this stops happening.
Well said. And just one more time for those of you just joining, United for East Palestine Independent Science Fund. This is to help them with some of the testing that the government is apparently not paying for. They've raised a little bit over $3,000. That goal is $100,000. Please donate if you can. Eric, if you can put that link in the chat one more time for the newbies. And Alex, thank you so much for coming on. You're more than welcome back. I'll reach back out to you within like a month or so, because I want to see if there have been new updates, if anything has changed or if anything has improved for people there. But we definitely have to keep talking about this story, because the United States government is definitely turning a blind eye to what's happening to people there. But before you go, really quick, can you tell everybody where can they find you on socials?
Yes, so United for EP, that's our tag all across the board. It's our email, Gmail, unitedforep@gmail.com, Twitter, United for EP, Instagram, United for EP, Facebook page, United for EP. You can also check out our Facebook group, which is United for East Palestine, Ohio in parentheses. We are working with some awesome organizations like River Valley Organization, and we are trying to organize a summit of organizations all over, from anywhere and everywhere, with an interest in addressing the long-term question of how do we stop this from happening? How do we put common sense reformations in place so that we just have three basic, not common sense things of clean air, clean water, and soil you can grow food and it's not going to poison you. And these are systemic problems that need to be addressed, and not tomorrow, not in a year, not after next election cycle. We need to come together and treat this as the emergency that it is right now. So if you're interested in participating in that, send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, etc. Help us get the word out. If you know anybody in independent media who would let us be on their show, let us know. We're trying to get in front of as many voices and as many faces as we possibly can. We have other people besides myself who are also interested in being interviewed. I just happen to be someone who he made available more often, because a lot of these people have full-time jobs, but there are amazing people who are doing amazing work. People like Professor Welton and his team, Purdue University, have information is absolutely vital to get out. We've been trying to get them in front of more people's faces so they can find more people can find out the information that they have. People like Professor Galam and her team on the medical side. We're trying to get. We've created a website so people can put in information so we can get a clear map of exposure maps to find out how far this plume is spread. We have high split models. We are doing everything we can to put out information. So anything you can do to help us put the word out, thank you.
Awesome. Alex, if you can DM me those links, and then I can add them to the video when the live stream is over. I can add those links for people so they can just click right on those.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Sabrina, for having me on and for helping us get the word out. Really appreciate all of your viewers and everybody. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks, Alex.
Bye.
Okay, guys. We have to keep talking about that situation in East Palestine, Ohio. More people need to know about what's happening there. Some people I've talked to didn't even know this was a thing, which was kind of surprising to me. But that tells you about the role of mainstream media and how they're covering this story or choosing to not cover the story anymore since Pete Buttigieg has been there to visit. So we have to keep talking about this. Welcome, guys. Happy Thursday. We have a great show tonight. I want to shout out a couple of comments, patrons, and then we're going to get into the other news stories. Interesting stories tonight. Shout out to Tumbleweed for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to Roger Meadows for the super chat. Shut the revolving door on regulatory agencies. There you go. At Kid says, hi, Sabby. OSHA will be requiring for the companies involved to perform thorough root cause investigation, including air quality and water testing, would need to be performed over a period of time. Yeah, I imagine they're going to have to do this for a while. Stephanie says, nationalize the railroad. Bingo. Boom, 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 boom. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. We're still here for you, Alex. Should you decide to change your mind on running Ohio Medicare for All as a citizen ballot initiative amendment, I know you're busy, but asking you to reconsider. People do want to help you get single payer health care. I have trust in Ohioans, not in government or Norfolk Southern. Yeah, you cannot trust those companies. And thank you for the tip. JVB says, thank you, Sabby and Alex. Thank you so much. Okay, quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. And then we're going to dive into those stories there. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Thank you guys so much. And I do have a couple of new Sabby patrons to shout out. Over here, we call them newbies. Wow, that is all the way down there. I don't know what I did there. I'll fix that later. Let's give it up for Wanderer and John Freese. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to you guys. Thank you all so much. You really do help out this show, believe it or not. Okie doke. What are we going to discuss tonight? Interesting stories. Some that may be a little bit entertaining for you, actually. Tonight, we are discussing Joe Rogan blames the system. What system is Joe Rogan referring to? Interesting discussion there. Speaking of healthcare, we're also going to discuss Marianne Williamson. Anger, South Carolina. Yikes. And I saw a comment earlier. Yes, that is Marianne Williamson. And the gentleman next to her is Marcel Dixon. And that exchange did not go well. Did not go well. But we're going to talk about that because we need to talk about some of the things that were said during that exchange. And we need to correct a couple of things. We're also going to discuss Macron is under pressure. Make sure you go ahead and take that poll, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think that President Macron should resign? I'm going to give you an update about the protests in France. And yes, they are still happening. They're still going. And of course, United for East Palestine was just here. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this story. In Paris, France. Now, for those of you who are new and may not be aware, President Macron had decided to basically make an executive decision to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. The French said, no, we are not putting up with that and we're not having it. This is a part of their pension reform. His excuse is that they're not going to have the funds to continue to pay people, so he's going to have to increase the age. Problem is, he didn't get the consent of other politicians, and so they were a little bit angry too. This was more so like an executive order, something that our president would do. And also, of course, the citizens of Paris are not happy about this as well. And they have been protesting for days. I think we are now on day 11. He did issue a rule saying that it was illegal to gather in large groups in an effort to stop those protests. But that hasn't worked. The people in France don't care about his rule, and they are still protesting. And this brings a question in reference to President Macron's leadership. So I want to play this clip here that says France protests fight for the right to retire continues. This was uploaded yesterday, so we're going to go ahead and get into this clip.
Violence, arson, clashes, that's what happened across France as hundreds of protesters took to the streets on Tuesday to detest Emmanuel Macron's pension reform, which raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. Protests descended into chaos in several cities, including in Paris, where protesters lit fires in the historic center of the French capital. The protests were given a new momentum by Macron's government refusal to back down from the reform.
So this is something that's been happening. They're setting things on fire, basically. Notice it says 13,000 police personnel are deployed in France. Like, the protesters are not stopping.
There is every reason to believe that this was an isolated act, and the circumstances and motives behind it are currently under investigation by the judicial police.
Now, France's iconic monument, the Eiffel Tower, also closed its doors to visitors as its staff went on a strike amid a new day of nationwide protests. The protesters marched along railway lines in Paris in the 10th day of the union-coordinated action against the government's pension reforms. You could see striking workers waving burning flares. They invaded and blocked train tracks serving one of Paris's main railway stations.
So this is another thing that is happening now. They have actually started to block off the railroad. So I told you guys that they're disrupting. It's not just commerce. They are disrupting transportation services as well. So we saw the airlines had a factor. We saw the Uber industry there was also hit. And now we also see they're actually blocking the railroad tracks, preventing the trains from going through. Now, some of the train lines have already been canceled anyway, but they're trying to make an abrupt halt in France for every industry.
It has set everyone on fire. We cannot accept that and say that we are in a democracy. When you have more than half of the people in the country against this reform, people are fighting. We can't let this go. And what adds fuel to the fire is the behavior of the government.
Now, in the city of Nantes, the day marked the most serious violence yet of a 3-month revolt against President Macron's reform plan. Protesters lit fires in the western French city. Demonstrators set cars and garbage cans on fire, while others shot fireworks at police.
So the people are actually retaliating against the police. This is what is happening now. Now it has gotten to the point where the police are actually being pushed back by the protesters because there's more protesters than there are police. And this is what I've said before. There's always more of us than there are of them. The French realized that.
Protesters in Nantes earlier blocked access roads to the city, creating 45 kilometers of congestion. Last Thursday saw the most violent clashes yet between protesters and security forces as tensions erupted into pitched battles on the streets of Paris. The police have also been accused of using excessive force, both by protesters and rights bodies, including the Council of Europe. Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin said a total of 13,000 police were deployed during the protest throughout the day, more than ever before. The number, a record, was justified by a major risk to public order.
So the fires have been an ongoing situation, like during the day and during the evening.
Beyond is now available in your...
Okay, and that was just a taste. There's more, because like I said, people are starting to question whether or not President Macron should even keep his position. Maybe it's just best if he just decides to stand down. But the protests have actually ramped up. I want to play this clip here, which says that protests intensify across France over pension reform. This was also uploaded yesterday, and that's what I've been trying to explain. Over the past couple of days, these protests have increased. I think the media, mainstream media, is downplaying some of those numbers. I have had a couple of people that live in France that actually reached out to me and told me that the numbers are actually higher than what mainstream media is saying. I think they're doing that on purpose to keep people calm.
Tonight, fires across France. One protester telling us this is a war. Hundreds of thousands taking to the streets, and police officers deployed across the nation.
13,000 police officers have been deployed, and the people still push the police officers back. And that's why I'm telling you, I think the mainstream media, they're actually deflating the numbers of protesters that are out on those streets. Look at the gear that the police officers have. They have shields. I guess we will refer to this as riot gear, but they are protected in such a way to take on large numbers of people. And one of the reasons that they're pushing back on the increase of the retirement age is because some of the people already have health issues and they haven't even reached 62 yet. So that's something to think about. I've always said this before. I think it's ridiculous. Even here in the US, retirement age, 65 years old. I don't think anyone should have to work till they're 65 years old, regardless of what country you live in. I don't think that anyone should have to work past that either. And I've seen people, they will work until they're 70 so that they can have an increase of Social Security. In fact, one of my coworkers did that. She passed 65 and she continued to work until she was 70 so that her Social Security would be higher and so that her pension from MIT would be higher. They don't do the pension thing anymore for newbies. That was more like something you were grandfathered into. But anywho, no one should have to do that. So they're already experiencing health issues and they're wanting them to work longer. So I totally understand where they're coming from.
That's not possible. Cracks may be emerging, though. Paris sanitation workers suspending their weeks-long strike that has left mounds of trash piled high in city streets. Macron's government also signalling an olive branch, saying the president has said that he's ready to meet with the unions once because we respect our institutions. Macron.
So you see what's happening because there was that pressure from notice the pressure came from the outside. The pressure didn't come from the politicians. The pressure came from the people, the activists, the protesters outside of the electoral system. And so now, because they have been protesting for so many days, now he is finally saying he is ready to sit down and meet with some of the unions and come up with some type of negotiation. But mark my words, that would not have happened without the pressure from the activists on the outside.
Increasingly unpopular, despite his re-election last year, looking for a legacy, a battle of wills between the president and his people.
And with that, Keir Simmons joins top story tonight from Paris. Keir, we're getting some late word about another strike, and I know you have some new reporting for us.
That's right, Tom. There will be another strike, an 11th day of strikes in April. So that shows you that the protesters are determined to keep going. It's damaging for President Macron. Remember that he is planning in a week's time, just think about this, to travel to France to meet with President Xi. And one of the issues on the agenda, of course, will be the war in Ukraine. So you've got the president of France, one of the most important leaders in Europe, heading to China for those negotiations, while at the same time, he's got all of these disturbances back home. I mean, that
probably not a good idea for President Macron to leave the country right now and go to China. Can you imagine if the protesters are doing this now? Imagine what's going to happen if he actually leaves the country. So I think the thing is now the people have found a way to make their president understand that they actually have the power because they are greater in number. This is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. When the people come together, by the way, are the people in France out in the streets, are they saying, hey, are you on the right or the left? Are they saying that? I don't think so. I think they're just pissed about the increase of the retirement age and the pension. And they said, let's all come together and push back against this.
That's the picture that makes this really kind of challenging on a global scale.
And Keir, going back to some of the images we saw in your report from today and from over the weekend, are the protests so bad that they're disrupting the daily life of Parisians? Social media is now full of these sort of memes, mocking Parisians, if you will, trying to go on with their life, but burning garbage in the streets.
Yeah, I mean, look, but it's a great city, Tom, right? And like all great cities, life continues even while there are these protests, even something close to riots at times taking place in some of the streets. You can see here behind me, life is carrying on.
It's like Grand Theft Auto. If you ever played Grand Theft Auto where there's a vehicle burning in the street and at the same time life just goes on, like there's people walking down the street, going to like a cafe. There's a couple sitting at a table outside of a restaurant. It kind of reminds me of Grand Theft Auto.
This city. Listen, I think the question here, Tom, is this. How much of a challenge is this really for for President Macron, who is so powerful? French presidents are so powerful. And are we seeing here Macron maybe beginning to win this fight and a real change in the fabric of French society? Because that's what the protesters think they are fighting over. It's not just about retirement age, they think. They think it's about what France is about.
And finally, Keir, tourism is such a big part of the Parisian economy. Is that being talked about at all? Because if you're anywhere in the world and you're seeing what's happening in Paris right now, you may want to reschedule that trip.
Yeah, you may do. You shouldn't do, because actually these are isolated events here in France and here in Paris. I'll tell you something really interesting, Tom. People have a perception of France as safe. So whenever something like this happens, there can be an impact on tourism, but it doesn't tend to last very long. And they make so much money from tourism here. Frankly, I think that is set to continue.
Okay. So there is more, because like I said, they have intensified these protests. These protests have increased. And I just want to show you a couple of other videos as well. I want to show you what the crowd actually looked like. Now, Steve Hank is saying that there were 1.3 million people in this particular clip. He says in Paris, the French protest against President Macron and his pension reforms have intensified. It is reported that a staggering 1.3 million people have gathered to protest. Macron is toast. Take a look at the scene. So this was March 28th. Just the other day. Look at this. Is it Coachella? It's not Coachella. It's a protest. If there's anyone in the chat that knows French, can you tell people what they're saying? I wish I knew what they were saying. I can't translate it. It's like the French Revolution. Oh, thank you, Stephanie, the national anthem. Okay, thank you for that. It's like the French Revolution is reborn. Like, that's a lot of people, a lot of people. And I really think it might even be more than 1.3 million, just from what I've been hearing from people who are over there. And I want to show you another clip as well, because the firemen also decided to join in. They even have the firemen. It would be interesting if some of the police officers just said, fuck it, I'm joining you guys. So in Paris, firemen joined a team of French protesters to demonstrate against President Macron's pension reform. Macron is toast. So Steve Hank, he keeps saying that Macron is toast. Go ahead and take that poll if you haven't had a chance to do so. Let me know whether or not you think Macron should resign. Cheers to the firefighters. Yeah, buddy. And there's even more. There's another clip that I have. Make sure I'm going to the right one. Oh, yes, the railroad workers. So Steve Hank continues and says, French workers have blocked the railroad tracks of the Gare de Lyon to oppose President Macron's proposed pension reform. This just confirms my schoolboy's theory of history. It just gives one damn thing after another. I told you they seized everything. They said, no train is coming through here. You got to love it. You got to love it. Now, if you didn't have a chance to do so, please remember to take that poll. We'll go ahead and reveal the results at the end of the show. I'm curious to see what you guys think Macron should do. I honestly think he should resign, but don't let that influence your decision. Terry says, I have to work until I'm 67 to get full retirement money. Yikes. Thank you for the super chat, the amazing Blumpkin. Hundreds. Yeah, it's definitely over 1 million people out there. It's over 1 million. I noticed they said that too in one of the videos. Thank you for the super chat, Vegan. Hello, Sabby. I voted no on your poll. So the protesters could bring out the guillotine. And just as Chris Hedges said at Rage Against the War Machine, referencing Alice in Wonderland, off with their heads, LOL. Interesting. Shout out to JB in the chat, says hello. Thank you for the super chat at Kid. Sabby, imagine if Americans did the same to protest for Medicare for all, $25, living wages, and more. We would win our humanity back. This is true. Thank you, Delthea, for the super chat. You should be eligible for a national pension in your 50s. The work week should not exceed 4 days, and the weekday should not exceed 6 hours. I agree with this, Delthea. I agree with this. And thank you for the super chat, Tom. BLM protest in 2020, they called riots. White people in Paris burning garbage, setting vehicles on fire, and attacking police. He calls something close to riots. Am I right? That's a good point, Tom. Although I will say CNN and MSNBC have not been referring to it as close to riots. They've been referring to it as rioting. And they're trying to, I believe, really not cover it that much to begin with because they don't want Americans to start to get ideas. So when they do cover it, they've been doing it in a way that they're demonizing the protesters. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Then we'll go to the next stories. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Demand from OHAG and all AGs whose states Norfolk Southern runs through their corporate charter be revoked. In regards to not forgetting about East Palestine, maybe we can bring on Flint and Jackson residents. Life continues in great cities. Have you seen NYC 2020 through 2021? Tumbleweed town. Good point. Good point. Before we go into the next story, I just want to prepare you that what you are about to see may bother you a bit, but we have to discuss it. I'm not one to cover Marianne Williamson often on this show, but something happened the other day, and I think we do need to discuss this because this is not okay. Actually, after I saw this, I retweeted this and I tagged Marianne and I said, I think you should apologize to Marcel. So what happened? Marianne, she's in South Carolina right now, so she's holding different meetings to meet with residents there about her candidacy. This is not something that's unusual. That was not the issue. Apparently, during this particular meeting, one of the residents, which is Marcel, you may remember him. He ran against Jim Clyburn for Congress. He was very vocal about the way that Jim Clyburn has basically neglected people in his district. It's one of the poorest districts in South Carolina. I'm familiar. I went to college in undergrad in South Carolina, so I'm familiar with it. And he is outspoken. Now, I have to retract something. When I was on this show the other night, I said that Marianne Williamson should focus on her strength, which is reparations. I think I need to pull that back based on what I heard her say in this exchange. Because Marcel is going to proceed to explain to Marianne that he appreciates the fact that she is brave enough to have it on her platform. But at the same time, he's going to try to explain to her why her numbers are incorrect. And I have documentation to back that up as well. Marianne's response, not too good. Not too good. And people have been calling it out. Even people I didn't expect to call it out have been calling it out. But this kind of thing, the statement that she made, this cannot be tolerated. So let's get started with the very first clip. This is a thread. So Marcel says, I went to see Marianne Williamson today. Incredible team. So he starts off by giving her a compliment. However, I am good on her. While I was stating facts on how other groups have gotten and continue to get reparations, when I got to Holocaust survivors, she pulled the BS. Well, let's just get into it. Here we go. It starts off okay.
Hi, yes, so I concur with a lot of things that you said. One, I ran for office and I'm running yet again against the king maker, James Clyburn. But my attitude, if you're the king maker, then your district should be living like royalty, and they're not. So I know exactly how they try to shame you, exclude you, and slander your name. And my thing is this: we as Americans need to grow a backbone, okay? When did we start worrying? Well, see, I'm a Black American Gullah Geechee. We've always had to stand up and fight for everything. And I know you was talking about how things used to be. Well, I was born, my great-great-grandparents are still alive. My great-grandparents were all still alive except one. And they told me the good old days for y'all weren't good old days for them. So they're used to having to fight and be slandered and be excluded and be denigrated. I want to thank you for being, and I'm going to say this because they have to say man enough. I'm going to thank you, a woman, for being man enough to do not what's popular, not what's easy, yes, but what's right. Yes. And you're running on a reparations platform.
Okay. So far, it's starting out okay. He thanked her for doing what he feels is right. But then things go south.
And that's the right thing to do. Now, I do want to give you some pointers, if you're open to it, about your reparations plan, because I face all kinds of backlash, which I gladly accept. I'm here for it. My ancestors who were fighting in these rice marshes and swamps didn't back down to this backlash. I will be an insult to my great-grandmother who died at 101 if I back down because of people saying mean things to me. One, reparations comes from the federal government. It does not come from your tax dollars. America pays reparations every single day. They're paying it to Ukrainians right now. They're paying it when they take care of people in the country illegally and going to the Trojan. They paid it to the Japanese Americans who were interned. Even though my great-grandfather helped to save the Jews from the Nazis, he came back to America and he was locked out of the GI Bill, which gave trillions of dollars to mainly white veterans that they say built the middle class. And yet those same Jews right now are getting reparations. People in Walmart.
Wait, I have to stop you.
Let's pause there for just a second before we get into the thick of it, because basically, you know, he has a point here when he talks about the GI Bill. I've talked about that before in the show. I told you that whole New Deal, like some of those policies that were implemented that were a part of FDR's New Deal actually discriminated against Black people and indigenous people in this country. That GI Bill was one of them. He also goes on to mention that reparations were given to the Japanese Americans because of the Japanese internment camps. That is true. In fact, if I remember correctly, I believe that happened under President Reagan. So that is true. Let's go on. We back up just a tad, because now she's asking him, what are you talking about in reference to Jewish people?
To America, and he was locked out of the GI Bill, which gave trillions of dollars to mainly white veterans that they say built the middle class. And yet those same Jews right now are getting reparations. People in Walmart.
Wait, I have to stop you. I am a Jew. What Jews right now are getting?
Okay. So what he ended with there is that he said that Jewish people right now are still getting reparations. And that's when Marianne intervenes here and cuts him off. And she says, what Jewish people are getting reparations? So this is part 2, where Marcel comes in and he says, everything I said was factual, including the fact that her reparations plan amount is insultingly low. This is another piece that comes up as well. My thing is, with this whole exchange, even if Marianne disagreed with him, I think it was the way that she responded and something that she said, which I really, really think rubbed people the wrong way. Let's go on.
I have to stop you. I am a Jew. What Jews right now are getting reparations?
The Jews who are Holocaust
Everything you said until now
survivors.
is true. What?
The Jews who are Holocaust survivors.
But they're not getting reparations from the American government.
No, they're not. What the American government did in 2014 agreed to facilitate a $12 million payback to Holocaust survivors.
That had nothing.
Okay, is that true? Now pay attention to what he said. He said in 2014, the American government facilitated it. They facilitated $12 million payment of reparations to survivors of the Holocaust. Just remember that, because I think she heard that differently. So here's her response.
$12 million payback to Holocaust survivors.
That had nothing to do with the U.S. government giving
No,
money
the
to the
U.S.
Jews.
government did facilitate that payback.
That facilitation is with an administrative Germany.
Okay.
Germany paid reparations.
Well,
to
so
the
my
Jewish
point is, though,
organization.
but
the
my
United
point-
States did not pay
But
reparations.
the United States government facilitated, and the point still exists.
So she's saying that Germany was actually the country that paid those reparations. But what he's trying to explain to her is that the U.S. government still facilitated it, and that was under Obama. We're going to show receipts here in a second. Let's continue.
Me, a descendant of American slaves, haven't seen a penny yet. At the end of slavery, and I know you probably know these numbers, 42 to 84 trillion dollars was the value of those of us who were enslaved. And I like the fact that you're running on reparations, but you have $1 trillion as the amount, and that is insultingly low. And
Okay, the other problem here was the amount that she has on her platform. I'll show you a screenshot of that in just a second as well. The dollar amount that she has listed for reparations is $1 trillion. I'm going to explain to you after we get through the videos why that's actually problematic. Marcel's going to mention part of that too, but I'm going to show you why that number is significantly low compared to what the dollar amount recommended was actually back in the 80s. So you'll see that in just a second.
I understand that you may have to make it palatable because to the American public, but if we want to do what's right, we got to do what's right. And the amount that we are owed is at $70 trillion minimum. If you just do $1 trillion, they said in the 20th century, Black Americans lost $400 billion in just land theft alone. That doesn't go to Jim Crow. That doesn't go to being left from the Homestead Act that gave white Americans $10 trillion and 300 acres. So I love the fact that we're on a reparations plan.
So he's saying that the minimum should actually be 70 trillion. Let me make sure I said that correctly. Hold on. Make sure that's 70 and not 7. Give me a second.
The amount, and that is insultingly low. And I understand that you may have to make it palatable because to the American public, but if we want to do what's right, we got to do what's right. And the amount that we are owed is at $70 trillion minimum. If you just do $1 trillion, they said in the 20th century, Black Americans lost $400 billion in just land theft alone. That doesn't go to Jim Crow. That doesn't go to being left from the Homestead Act that gave white Americans $10 trillion and 300 acres. So I love the fact that we're on a reparations plan, but your plan is going to have to get those numbers right. It's got to be lineage-based. And
Okay, so he's not faulting her for having a plan, but he's trying to explain to her that her numbers are incorrect. They actually are. I'm going to show you that her numbers are incorrect. And also that he said it has to be lineage-based as well, meaning that it has to be given to people who are descendants of slavery in this country, not just someone who is Black per se. So for example, this is where some people get confused. But when people talk about lineage based, that means like for some people who are friends of mine that are Jamaican and they were born in this country, but their parents were born in Jamaica. So they're a first generation immigrant in the US. They would not qualify for lineage based reparations because technically, because their parents immigrated here, they are not considered a descendant of slavery.
The money needs to go directly to us. Because when the Japanese Americans got their money, it didn't go to a council, it went straight to them. Those Holocaust survivors, that money goes straight to them. That's right. We deserve to have it even more so.
Yeah, so let me say a couple of things. First of all, I honor how you stand up for your ancestors, and I stand up for mine.
That part right there. That part right there. Oh boy, Marianne, you did not have to say that.
I honor how you stand up for your ancestors, and I stand up for mine.
She said, I'm honored that you stand up for your ancestors, and I'm going to stand up for mine. I don't know. Here we go.
The United States has not paid $1 of reparations to Jews for the Holocaust. That is number one. And by the way, as far as some of the things you said about Roosevelt, which was true about his treatment of black people, he didn't do well by the Jews during the 2 years when Hitler said they could still leave. So I will not stand here while anti-Semitic tropes are repeated.
That part right there. This is the part that a lot of people are upset about. Let me rewind back. Again, you can disagree with people, but now listen to what she says.
That is number one. And by the way, as far as some of the things you said about Roosevelt, which was true about his treatment of black people, he didn't do well by the Jews during the 2 years when Hitler said they could still leave. So I will not stand here while anti-Semitic tropes are repeated.
She said, I will not stand here and listen to anti-Semitic tropes from you. So now a lot of people on social media are saying, wait a minute now. So if we question the amount that you have for your reparations plan, if we push back on that, if we try to explain to you the history, now all of a sudden we're anti-Semitic? Do you see the problem here, people? He pushes back, but this really gave me Karen vibes. Like, seriously, I saw this on Twitter and I was like, oh, I can't believe she said that one. Can't believe she said that one. That was not good. Not good.
That's not anti-Semitic. That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the truth.
Then she tried to double down. So there's more that we can get into as well. Like I said, this is a thread. She doubled down on it.
That's not anti-Semitic. That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the truth. Holocaust survivors are getting reparations. That is not anti-Semitic. That's the truth. And I will continue to do so. And standing up for my ancestors means speaking the truth. Holocaust survivors did get 14 trillion facilitated. That is a fact. That is a fact. I don't know what it meant. All I know that my ancestors have not gotten a penny.
Okay.
Yikes. This is some of the way that you respond sometimes to people is important. For this piece right here, I started to see a different side of Marianne during this discussion. Look at the way that she walks over to watch.
Holocaust survivors did get 14 trillion facilitated. That is a fact. That is a fact. I don't know what it meant. All I know that my ancestors.
You don't know. You don't know because it's not true. Is it not true? Because see, Marcel, this is someone, he's very much involved in reparations organization. I believe he's a part of FBA. This is something he knows a lot about. Let's go on.
Have not gotten a penny. My ancestors have not gotten a penny. That's all I know. And it's an insult for the American government to facilitate a facilitation of payment to Holocaust survivors while my great-grandfather is still alive and he fought to save the Jews from the Nazis.
Excuse me. It is because I'm Jewish that I feel so strongly about reparations.
And I feel strongly about reparations for my people too.
Germany gave $89 billion in reparations to Jewish organizations long before 2014. The fact that I am from a people who was wronged and to whom Germany paid reparations, the fact that I am aware as a Jew that even though reparations doesn't mean the Holocaust didn't happen, any more than reparations would mean slavery didn't happen, reparations paid by Germany to the Jewish organizations, they were not directed to Jews, they were to Jewish organizations, has gone far to establish not only financial restitution, but also emotional and psychological healing between Germany and the Jews of Europe.
Right here.
That is what...
What the... Baby Ethernet! No! Oh my God!
Right here.
Obama administration has awarded $12 million for assistance to Holocaust survivors. This happened in October 2015. I don't lie, and I know my information.
So he was looking the information up on his phone. So it's 2015. I'm going to show you that article in just a second. But he was trying to tell her that this was done. He's not disputing that Germany did not provide like reparations. He's not saying that. What he is saying is that there was additional payments that happened in 2015 under Obama administration. And there's another one too that came from France. And I know some of you watching, I know how you feel about the whole fact that France should be giving reparations to Haiti. So you might cringe when you see this. But if Marianne would have just looked at his phone to see what he was referring to, I don't know.
This is not right. This is not right. Actually, I'm more than glad to...
You cut me off. I was talking, and you cut me off saying it was anti-Semitic. That's not what it was. I was telling the truth. I was telling the truth. You cut me off and accused me of being anti-Semitic. I'm speaking for my answers. I'm telling the truth, and I don't care who doesn't want to hear it.
The United States has not given $1.
Well, the facts disagree with you.
The United States has not given
The facts disagree with you.
Exactly. I just saw your comment and it disappeared. Shoot balls. Solely. LOL. So that story of Marianne being a hothead is real. You know, that's exactly the same type of feeling I got when I saw this video. I was like, oh, that's not a good look, considering the articles that came out, right? There may be one more clip here. And it goes on to say, Marcel says, do not accuse me of being a liar or saying something anti-Semitic when I spoke the truth. The U.S. has facilitated reparations to Holocaust survivors or their descendants. One could even discuss the billions America sends to Israel each year. I sent the articles to her director. And so that's the gentleman that actually was on the panel on Bad Faith podcast. That's him that you saw walking around the table.
The facts disagree with you. The facts disagree with you.
Can we talk afterwards?
Sure.
We can move on to
I don't know if I can continue if this gentleman is going to cut me off.
Well, you should have accused me of being anti-Semitic.
We know you're not.
Exactly.
We know you're not, so it doesn't matter.
And I'm sorry that we're going to
Also, you guys notice there's not many people in this room. And this is South Carolina, and South Carolina is now the first primary state. That was not a good look. That was not a good look for her to respond that way. I really do think she needs to issue an apology. I really do.
I have stood for reparations. I do stand for reparations. I think reparations for slavery are important, actually. This gentleman is speaking to the issue of the money, so very quickly I will say this, because I think it is important. My reparations plan is in my proposal, is for $1 trillion. This gentleman is absolutely correct, actually. There were between 4 and 5 million enslaved people at the end of World War II, at the end of the Civil War. Tecumseh Sherman did promise every formerly enslaved family of 40 acres and a mule. And that was a very serious thing. If you were to look at financial remuneration in terms of the value in today's terms, there would be trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. I think that this is really for Black Americans to decide. It's not for me to decide. You have a candidate here which is suggesting a plan that I believe in our generation could be politically feasible. If you feel, no, it's simply not enough money, we want 14 or 15 trillion, then I suppose you can, if you wish, wait for a president who might, the candidate who might say 14 or 15 trillion.
No. See, I don't like this response when she says, if you feel that it should be 14 to 15 trillion, then you should wait for a candidate who will propose 14 to 15 trillion. If the data shows that that's what it should be, or at least be starting out with, why can't you just change the numbers that you have for your plan? I felt like that was kind of a weak response. Like, if you feel it should be more, then you can wait for a candidate who is going to make it more. That's not fair. That's not right. That's not right. That's just like Joe Biden saying, like, well, I know some of you guys want Medicare for all, but I'm not going to do that. So you can either go with the expansion of Obamacare, or you can try to wait for a president who's going to give you Medicare for all. That's not cool, because they know, she and Marianne knows, most likely there's no one else that's going to come around and do this anytime soon. So that's not cool.
Not for me to decide. In terms of the council, Reparations Council, instead of direct money given to descendants of enslaved people, the issue is, I believe, if I owe you money, I don't get to tell you how to spend it. So I don't think it's for white people to tell black people.
Okay, so another piece here, and I'll show it from her website. She doesn't want to actually give cash reparations, right? So there's different levels of reparations. Like, some people can talk about like fixing the education system, et cetera, yada, yada. But the idea, at least from what I've seen from the organizations, from ADOS and from FBA, cash reparations should be a part of it. Marianne doesn't want to do that. Marianne wants to give the money to Black organizations and let those organizations figure out what to do with it. No. I'll show you her website in just a second, but to the point where she called him anti-Semitic, which I think is incredibly dangerous. Okay. Even Afeni issued a response to this. She said, I thought it was common knowledge that Jewish people got reparations for the Holocaust. When did this become controversial to say? You see the problem now? And she even put the screenshot, which shows Germany offers one of the largest Holocaust reparations packages and a special fund for Ukrainians. So she shows that screenshot there. But what I'm really concerned about is the fact that now, because of the way that Marcel was treated, and by the way, me and Marcel don't agree on everything. Me and Marianne don't agree on everything. Me and Afeni don't agree on everything. But when it comes to that particular issue, was Marcel correct? Let's see. Let's dabble a little bit here. Now, according to this is what Marcel was referring to. The Obama administration earmarks $12 million for Holocaust survivors. This article was published October 2nd, 2015. This is what he was pulling up on his phone. Marianne didn't look at this. Now, remember, he said that the U.S. government facilitated it. Marianne kept trying to tell him this did not happen. So I don't know what's happening here then. It says funds to be distributed over 5 years, 1/4 of 130,000 U.S. victims of Nazi persecution live under the poverty line. So I'll just point out the numbers here. This is not a long article. It says the Obama administration, make this bigger. The Obama administration has awarded $12 million for the assistance to Holocaust survivors. The allocation from the Department of Health and Human Services to the Jewish Federations of North America to be dispersed over 5 years is part of an initiative launched in late 2013 by Vice President Joe Biden to address the needs of survivors in the United States, a quarter of whom live below the poverty line. So to that point, what Marcel was trying to say is that even when it comes to descendants of slavery, African-American descendants of slavery in this country, it has never happened for us, though. This is the point that he's trying to address. So according to this article, Marcel is correct. This did happen under the Obama administration. It goes on to say, combined with matching private funds, the approximately $2.5 million per year over the 5 years will support $4.1 million in programming annually for organizations that help Holocaust survivors. According to JFNA, the funds will be used to advance innovations in person-centered, trauma-informed supportive services for Holocaust survivors. So again, hold on, close that there. With this award, we will be able to advance our efforts to provide crucial services to vulnerable survivors, including those living in poverty, those in the Orthodox Jewish community, and those from the former Soviet Union. That comes from Mark Wilf, the chairman of the JFNA's National Holocaust Survivor Initiative. So I just, and that wasn't the only time. France, this was also 2015. This was in November. France to pay $60 million in reparations to Holocaust survivors in the US and beyond. Now, this one threw me for a loop because I'm not here to say that they shouldn't have reparations, but France still hasn't paid reparations to Haiti. So, several thousand Holocaust survivors in the US, Israel, and other countries can now apply for compensation from a $60 million reparation fund for victims who were transported to Nazi death camps aboard French trains. It goes on to say, the state-owned French train company SNCF is accused of helping to deport more than 70,000 Jews while France was under Nazi occupation and the control of the Vichy government. Last year, the US and France brokered the agreement to offer financial compensation to those who were deported, as well as their spouses and orphaned children. The amount of $60 million was hotly debated. So it's just, France is expected to wire $60 million lump sum to the US Treasury by November 30th, and the money will be distributed by the State Department sometime after May 2016. So I don't see anyone making this up. CBS News reported this. Now, to the point, the other point that Marcel had about the money. So on Marianne's website, I'm going to show you what she has on her site, and then I'm going to show you what the experts say that amount should be. So on her website, under the issues, you can find a section that says reparations, race relations, and reconciliation. I want to get to the money portion. Make this a little bit bigger for you. She gives the big spiel there as to why it is needed and it's a debt that's owed. But let's get to the money. Specifics. According to my plan, reparations for slavery will be paid in the amount of a minimum of $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Hold on to that amount. This is what Marcel was trying to correct her on, that this number is too low. These payments will be made over a period of 20 years to a reparations council made up of Black leaders from across the spectrum of American academic, cultural, and political leaders. This piece right here. The council would include 30 to 50 members, all descendants of enslaved people, and all who have some scholarly, cultural, and political connection to the issue of reparations. The council, not the American government, would determine how the money is to be dispersed. No. No. Why are you allowing a council to decide how to use the money? Now, Marianne said in her speech, and she said this before, it's not her right to decide how people should spend that money. Got it. But there's a difference between not deciding how people should spend the money and giving the money directly to the people. And it seems like, based on what I'm seeing here, she doesn't want to give the money directly to the people. She wants to give the money to a reparations council and let them decide how the money should be used. Here's the problem. What if the reparations council decides not to give the money to the people? What if the reparations council decides, yes, let's use the money to fix the education system, which I have no problem with fixing the education system. Let's use it to improve community centers, yada, yada. And by the time all that money is gone, before you know it, none of you guys got any cash payments in your hand. That is the problem. And who is supposed to be a part of this council? Who are these leaders that are supposed to be kept? Some of these leaders, some of even the civil rights leaders from back in the day, they're not making too many good decisions nowadays. Okay, let's just be real. So to me, this makes no sense. I don't understand that. This is just another way to prevent actually giving Black people, or excuse me, those who are lineage-based, this is another way of preventing them having the money directly in hand. When Japanese Americans that were part of the Japanese internment camps were given reparations, they were given direct cash payments. It seems like to me, the only time people don't want to give direct cash payments in reference to reparations is when it is Black people. All of a sudden, this money got to go to something else. No. Just give the money directly to the people. I don't get this. I really don't get it. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not a part of these organizations, but I know people who are a part of those organizations, and they would not be cool with that. And I'm really surprised by that, because I know Marianne has spoken to people from the ADAS community, and I'm really surprised that she doesn't want to give those cash payments directly to the people. Now, the problem with the 1 trillion, I want to show you why that number is significantly low. Let me go down here, get rid of the video. This article in particular here, we go to the finances, calculating reparations. Let me highlight this. Calculating reparations. Now, this is coming from Dr. Sandy Darity, who's done extensive research on this, and co-author Andrea Kirsten Mullen. A new book called From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century, that analyzes past estimates for reparation amounts and offer new ones. Listen to this. The University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign economist Larry Neal estimated, this is why Marianne's number is wrong, in 1983 that America owed 1.4 trillion in reparations to Black descendants of enslaved people. 1.4 trillion in 1983. And Marianne right now, as a part of her reparations platform, has 1 trillion. If it was 1.4 trillion in 1983, why is it 1 trillion in 2023? It is lower than what they recommended in the 80s. This is why Marcel was talking about this. This is why he told her her numbers were incorrect. According to Darity and Mullen, that 1983 figure compounded at 4%, 5%, and 6% interest by 2019 would be 5.7 trillion, 8.1 trillion, and 11.4 trillion, respectively, per their calculations. So again, her numbers are significantly low. I retweeted Marcel's tweet, and I did ask Marianne to apologize because I think she owes Marcel an apology. Number one, for calling him anti-Semitic, and number two, not listening to him about the calculations. It is what it is. I'll go to some of the comments here, and then we'll get into the next story. I don't know how else to say it, man. I don't know how much to say it, but the data has already been done. Let's go up. Lambert says Marianne doesn't want to piss off the centrists. She wants by offering a fair deal. That could be part of it. Betsy says, imagine if the 100 billion plus given to Ukraine had been given to Black Americans instead. You know? Thanks for the super chat, Roger. Blacks whose ancestors came to the U.S. by force, not choice. Right. If someone was asking in the chat, what do you mean by lineage? Thank you for that. Thank you for the super chat, Kelly. Finally caught a live stream. Thank you for all you do, Sabby. Thank you so much, Kelly. The Oracle and Bernie Sanders helped facilitate the efforts of the State Department to aid the Holocaust survivors and their descendants in securing reparations. Here you go. Thank you for the super chat, Graham. I've spoken to Trump supporters who are in favor of a basic income / reparations for all American citizens. Would this be unfair? Poll your audience. So there's a difference between basic income and reparations. Universal basic income, that's for everybody, regardless of what you make, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your history that you have with this country. Reparations, however, is for descendants of slavery because it was a debt that was owed to those people. We never received the promise that General Sherman promised us, which was 40 acres and a mule. And that's why we don't really have, for the most part, generational wealth. But it's not just because of what happened after slavery, it's also the Jim Crow laws. It also goes back to the Black Wall Streets that were burned. It also goes back, this goes all the way up into the 90s, which includes Joe Biden's crime bill. Thank you for the super chat, Susan. The USA defended the Jews by going to war, yet enslaved, murdered, and robbed Black folks. What is going on? Yeah. Yeah, man. Thank you, Delthea. The BMC doesn't need to handle the money. I can handle my money all by myself. F a reparation council. Yeah, I don't get that at all. I really don't. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Just give people the money. Thank you for the tip, Chuck. Does Marianne not realize Marcel Dixon could be an ally of hers? Marcel is running against Jim Clyburn in South Carolina. Marianne is finished. Thanks, Sabby, for your great work. Thank you so much for that comment, Chuck. That is actually a really good point. He could be an ally for her. I don't know if that's still going to work out now. I don't know if she contacted him and they had a talk or not, but South Carolina, first primary state. Not starting out too well. All right, we're going to our last story here, which is Joe Rogan is so upset. Why is he upset? He's mad at the system, the healthcare system. And Joe Rogan, he's talking to a doctor here in this particular interview. This was pretty recent. Why are the healthcare costs so high in America? There's a lot of good things said here. Listen to this, and I'll chime in between.
The Joe Rogan experience.
And then healthcare. Like, did you see the thing I posted a couple of weeks ago about this bill we got from when Jill was with
our middle son in San Diego visiting a friend, and he was sick. So she had to take him to an ER, right? Like our doctor's not there, right? Obviously we live here. So they did like regular chemistry lab on him. That's like about a $12 blood test, and gave him like, I don't know, 250 to 500 cc of IV fluid. That was it. That was it. What do you think the bill was?
$1,200.
I don't remember it because I'd have to look at the post I put up. I think the bill was $6,000, of which we owed $2,000.
Isn't that insane? This is the cost of healthcare in this country. If you talk to people that work for some of these pharma companies, and they can tell you how much it costs to make prescription drugs that a lot of people in this country heavily depend on, and the cost that they actually charge for those prescription drugs, these pharma companies are ripping people off left and right. And it's not just that, it's also the hospital here. What did he tell you about the bill? The bill was $6,000. They owed $2,000. And that's with health insurance. They've been ripping off the American people for years.
That's insane.
That's problematic.
That's a real problem.
Yeah, it might have been more than that. $6,000 bill, our insurance somehow picked up maybe $3,500. We were stuck with $2,500. Now, juxtapose that with the following fact. Fewer than 50% of Americans today, if given 24 hours, can produce $2,500 in cash.
Jesus Christ.
So when we say healthcare is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy, it's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Like there's nothing else matters besides healthcare when it comes to personal bankruptcy.
Right, because and there's student debt as well, but remember you can't file for bankruptcy for student loans. You can't. That's the thing. That was put in place by Joe Biden, right? So when it comes to medical bills, if you can't pay them or you can't get on a payment plan, which sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, yeah, you can actually fall into medical bankruptcy.
I mean, this does infuriate me to no end. Like I sometimes think, like, is there any other problem I would ever be interested to devoting my full attention to besides the problem I work on now? That's the only other problem that would tempt me.
You know what's interesting too? If that problem was really tackled by our government and they did it in an efficient way, one of the ways they would have to do it, one of the ways they would have to address it in order to be efficient would be to encourage people to become metabolically healthy.
Of course.
We have zero encouragement. Zero. In fact, there's actually the opposite. There's encouragement for people to have body positivity and to not be fat phobic and to not fat shame, you know, and there's zero discussion about healthy diets and vitamin supplementation and the benefits of that. If
we're going to talk about this for just a second. What he's talking about he's basically talking about prevention, right? I believe this is 100% correct because if you think about it, even throughout our education system, we are taught about treatment. They tell us how to treat it. You get a cold, you have a cough, take cough medicine, right? If you have a fever, take Tylenol. If you're feeling a little flu-like, get some rest, drink some fluids. But they don't really teach you about wellness and prevention. Now, for some people, if you go to college and you major in nutrition, I had a roommate that majored in nutrition. She learned all of this stuff. She became a dietitian, so she knows what to do to prevent herself from getting sick. Now, does it work all the time? Not necessarily, but if she does get sick, she's not down for the count, like some of us may be. But the systems that we have in this country, even when it comes to the healthcare system, when it comes to your personal doctor, how many of you have a personal doctor that actually tell you how to prevent illness, how to prevent getting sick? If you have a child that constantly is getting ear infections, how many of these doctors are telling you how to prevent that from happening? How many of your doctors, how many of you, for your doctors that you have, how many of them are telling you about nutrition? This is a very important piece, I think. Nutrition is absolutely crucial. If you are not getting proper nutrition, it can lead to other health issues. That includes malnutrition as well. How many of them are telling you? How many of them telling you to eat more vegetables, to eat more fruit? How many of them are telling you not to consume so much dairy? Now, there are different doctors that you can go to. They practice more of a holistic approach. But again, your insurance would have to cover this. Some insurance plans do not cover holistic treatment. But even for me, I had this talk with you guys before. I had really bad acne when I was in high school, and I tried everything. Even what was the one? The I can't remember the name of it. Shoot. Proactive. That was the name. Even that one. And I thought that was going to be the one that was going to cure it for me. Worked for 3 months. Acne came right back. That was a constant cycle that I went through when I was in high school. It wasn't until I found a holistic doctor who treats acne through the means of nutrition. And that is what helped me. And the fact that I went all those years and not one doctor told me about how nutrition was actually the cause of my acne, it was crazy to me. It was crazy. So cutting back on dairy was a big one, and I'll notice it even today. If I have a lot of dairy, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get a pimple. Nobody told me until I was an adult. So these doctors that we have today, some of them are not teaching their patients about proper nutrition. And if you know about proper nutrition, that can actually prevent some of these health problems that people develop along the way. Some people are born with diabetes, but some people develop it. So we need to teach people about these preventative measures. We need to teach people to be proactive and not reactive.
If they just did, like, imagine if the government was responsible for our health care and they realize, hey, guys, like, we got a real problem here. We're spending too much money and we're losing money because what if the amount of money that they made was dependent upon the percentage of money that was spent on health care? Like, imagine if politicians, if their salary depended on the, like.
See, but I fear that would still get screwed up because then they would just cut costs, right? Like, I feel like.
What if that wasn't an option, though? What if,
well,
like,
the problem
there was,
is
like,
we
a
have
standard
to cut,
of
we
care?
have to cut costs. This is the problem, right? We're probably up to $10,000 per capita, which is, I mean, we're actually probably more than that. We're probably $12,000, $14,000 per capita. So we're at 2 to 5x every other developed nation in what we spend on healthcare.
But why?
And we get worse outcomes. Okay, so the big reason comes down to made up numbers. Look at my ER example. The blood test cost, the actual cost of ordering that blood test is $12. The bag of IV fluid is probably $38. So why do they inflate the cost so much? It's because they play a shell game with the insurance company.
Profit. That's why they inflate it for profit so that the insurance companies can get their cut and that the pharma companies can still get their cut because the insurance companies 9 times out of 10 is going to cover the entire procedure.
So they say we negotiate different rates with different insurance companies, and we're going to build up the price enormously, but we're going to offer you a really big discount. And we're going to make you our preferred network. We're going to be your preferred network. And there's a quid pro quo here, which is the price is enormous, but you don't actually have to pay that much. We're going to discount it to you. But if somebody comes in out of network, which we were, right? We were out of network because, our network is optimized around being in Austin and not in San Diego. You're going to get screwed. And of course, if you don't have insurance, forget about it. You're paying the fake money price.
The in-network and out-of-network thing is also an issue. If we had Medicare for all for everyone in this country, we wouldn't even have to worry about that. And this is a problem. Like if you're traveling and you get sick and you're in a different state, depending on the insurance plan that you have, all of a sudden now you're out of network. So you're going to have to pay a lot more than you would if you were in network if something were to happen to you. So even that is a scam. And I've been saying this for years. What do you mean in network and out of network? I've said the same thing about in-state and out-of-state tuition. That never made any sense to me. It's the same school. You're getting the same education. Why are you charging people that are attending the school from the state just above it? Why are you charging them twice as much in reference to tuition when it's the same school, just because they're coming from a different state? So the in-network and out-of-network thing, I've said this for a long time. I feel like that is just a scam.
Especially if there's a real injury.
Oh, yeah.
A real injury, you need surgery, and you're not insured. Oh, my God.
The other thing is we don't have the same laws around like drug pricing, right? So drug, the United States basically subsidizes the rest of the world in drug pricing. So we, in exchange for getting first dibs on the best drugs, we pay a higher price for them. And other countries are basically not going to pay that because you also have better purchasing power. So if you look at Canada, for example, like the government is buying the drugs, not the payer, right? So it's a totally different system. And the challenge is no system is going to be perfect, but what really bothers me about the discussion is we're missing the point that there are three variables that need to be optimized around. And everybody just talks about their favorite one. But you can't talk about one without talking about the other two. Because if you pull on one lever, you got to let up on one of the other levers. So the three levers are cost. How much does it cost to deliver this care? The second is quality. How good is the care? And the third one is access. How many people fall through the cracks? So if you look at the United States, we're very good on quality. When we deliver care, it's the best. There's a reason people come from all over the world here when they need their cancer surgery, right?
It depends. Because for people that live in some of these rural towns, they don't get the best quality when it comes to healthcare. Even in the United States, it depends where you live. That actually determines whether or not you are getting that best quality of healthcare. So it really does depend. Like, let's be real about it.
We are certainly at or above the best for everything that would be done in medicine. On cost, we are absolutely the worst. There's literally no country that pays more than we do for a given service.
Wow.
And on access, we're horrible for a developed nation. Horrible, right?
On cost, like what is the difference between, like, say, United States
and Canada?
Yeah.
2.5x, I would bet.
Wow.
Maybe 3x.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you can look at a country like Cuba, and you would need to know that they live longer than Americans. So they have a longer lifespan. And they have healthcare for everyone. So even though the quality of their healthcare may not be the same as the quality in the United States, they're still living longer than Americans because everyone has access to healthcare.
That's so crazy. And that's not like a third world country or something like that.
Right.
Like that's what's
so Canada is killing us in cost. They're killing us in access because everybody's covered,
yes.
But we have better quality. So you have to. So
right.
that's the trade-off. Like,
right.
I mean, I do talk about how my mom is getting largely veterinary medicine in Canada. I mean, like, her healthcare is horrible as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
totally
I've had
unacceptable.
Many friends in Canada that have complained.
No, it's totally unacceptable.
For the Canadians in the chat, is this true? I actually had a guest on one year that was from Canada, and he told me, like, yeah, the lines can be kind of long, but you may have to wait a little bit longer. But that's just kind of funny because, like I said, even here in the United States, if you go to the ER, you may have to wait a little bit longer there too. Like here, I mean, when I go to the doctor, it's not like I get to see the doctor right away. They tell me to get there 15 minutes earlier, and then I still have to wait, and then the doctor's late. I never understood that either. Why do I need to be there 15 minutes early and you're not even on time? Tell me about it. So having spoken to people who do live in Canada, some of them have told me it's not as bad as the way that some of the politicians in this country try to make it seem. So I don't know. But for those of you who are living in Canada and you're in the chat, let me know how you feel about that.
So they have bad care, but
at
it's
least
more
everybody gets
accessible,
it, and it doesn't
everybody
cost
gets
you
it.
any money.
And is it bad care because the physicians are not incentivized to provide better care because they don't make as much money?
No. So first of all, I mean, at least I don't want to speak out of school because I'm so far removed from it. But when I was growing up, they had introduced salary caps. So physicians' salaries were capped. So when you hit your cap, you stopped working for the year. So high earning surgeons would stop working in August because they'd hit their like, let's say the salary cap was $300,000. If you earned $300,000 by August, you weren't going to get paid anymore.
So they would just sit down and sit out the rest of the year.
Yep, and come back in January.
It would create this real problem where there was a bottleneck.
Shortage of docs.
Yeah.
But the bigger issue is just that the government is in charge of what gets done and what does not get done. And there's sort of shortages, right? So if you, like things that you and I take for granted, right? If you tweaked your knee at jiu-jitsu tonight, you go get an MRI tomorrow. That doesn't happen in Canada. In fact, in certain provinces, it's illegal to have private clinics where you can go pay out of your own pocket to get an MRI.
But is that a life-saving procedure? Like, for example, I would imagine in Canada, if it's a life-saving procedure, I would imagine that you probably would see someone that day, right? I would imagine that if you went to the ER, they probably would see you that night. But I guess if it's a situation where it's not actually a life-saving procedure, or your life is not threatened in any way, shape, or form, I could see them saying, okay, you may have to wait a week or two to get that done. But let me know if I'm incorrect.
God, it's illegal?
Illegal. I think Ontario is one of those provinces, by the way.
Really?
Yep.
So Toronto.
In Toronto, I do not believe it is legal to have private medical clinics where you can pay out of pocket. So this is where...
Eric said Rogan's guest is about 35% full of shit. I felt like part of this episode, I felt like they were actually addressing the real issues in reference to healthcare and the cost of healthcare. But I also felt like his guest was also trying to, in a way, he was trying to scare people away from the idea of having something like Medicare for all.
When people say, oh, we should just be like Canada, I'm like, no. We should do something Canada does. We should have universal coverage.
And then have the option.
And then you have the option to bolt on.
Yeah.
So he's talking about, Medicare for all who want it. Remember they were saying that during the debates? So he thinks that we should have universal health care, but you should also have that option to be able to add a private health insurance onto that. And if I remember correctly, I thought Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill gave that option. I thought he had the option where you can add something else on if you wanted to get like cosmetic treatment. I thought it did, but who knows? Let me go to these comments here, and then I will finish off with Missouri, those last two measures. And then we're going to do call-in tonight. So Eric, whenever you get the poll ready, let me know. Yeah, let's go ahead and finish off with Missouri. So I only have two left. I'm not going to read all through this because we do have to do call in. So I believe I stopped right here. Okay, for ballot initiative results for the state of Missouri. I read that, I believe. Yes. This was number 3, I believe. Missouri Amendment 4 allowed legislator to require a city to increase funding without state reimbursement for a police force established by the State Board Amendment 2022. This was on the ballot in Missouri as a legislative referred constitutional amendment. This measure was approved, and it was approved by 63.19%. A yes vote supported allowing the legislator to increase minimum funding for a police force established by a state board of police commissioners. This specifically increased the minimum funding to the police force of Kansas City, Missouri. That's Nick's stomping ground. At the time of the election, Kansas City, Missouri was the only city that did not have local jurisdiction over its department, and therefore the only city that this measure impacted. Who supported it? State Senator Tony Lukemeyer, State Representative Doug Ritchie. One of the arguments was the actions of the mayor and the city council last year raised tremendous alarm regarding the stability of funding for something as important as the Kansas City Police Department. Who opposed it? State Senator Barbara Ann Washington, Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas, Kansas City Councilwoman Melissa J. Robinson. And then Roger's commentary here. This was a fund, the POPO policy SAB, where your comrade Nick add on this. Ain't this his wheelhouse? Domestic policy. Is your comrade sleeping or okay? This was specifically targeted to his city. It's what happens when we take our eyes off the ball and not watching our left flank or paying too much attention to what's going on beyond our borders or in DC, where we have no control over than what is happening right underneath our noses. I will show this to Nick. And then last but not least, Missouri Amendment 5, Department of the National Guard Amendment. A yes vote supported providing the state's National Guard with an executive department called the Missouri Department of the National Guard. This passed by 60.22%. So it goes on to say it's designated to create Missouri Department of the National Guard as an administrative department within the state's executive branch. Going into the 2022 election, the Missouri National Guard was part of the Missouri Department of Public Safety. As an executive department, the adjutant general who commands the National Guard is a member of the governor's cabinet. Amendment 5 defines the department's purpose as providing for the state militia, upholding the U.S. Constitution, upholding the Missouri Constitution, protecting the constitutional rights and civil liberties of Missourians, and providing other defenses as required. Who supported it? Governor Mike Parson, State Representatives Bill White and Adam Schnelting. One of the arguments was the mission of the Guard will not change. This is an administrative change. It will correct budgetary issue. It currently has to compete for money with other programs run by the Department of Public Safety. It's not able to make its request directly to the chief executive. There was no opposition. Okay. And then I thought this was the last one. Okay, this one's short. This one more. And then the last one, this one failed. Missouri Constitutional Convention question 2022, where a yes vote supported holding a state constitutional convention. That failed by 67.75%. That one's pretty much self-explanatory. So that is Missouri. We will move on to the next state, which I think it may be Mississippi. But I am going to take a quick break, and then we're going to head into call in. Eric, when you're ready, you can do the poll result as well, whether or not people think that President Macron should resign. That should be interesting to hear. But quick break, and then I'll be back, and we'll go over to call in.
All right. Here we are on a Thursday night. This is where we give our Sabrina a little break here. I'll swap these around. Here we go. All right, we're going to have call-in show. In a while, you can do call-in on your browser, or you can do call-in on your cell phone. I'm just putting the link here into the chat if you want to get an early start on that. Yeah, tonight's going to be on Marianne Williamson. We want to hear what you think in the call-in. All right, let's throw up our poll. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see how this looks. All right, so the poll tonight was, should President Macron resign? We had yes with 91%, no with 2%, and not sure with 7%. And I think even some of that no might have been a mistake. But yeah, pretty resounding there about should Macron resign. I guess there's that question of, or that issue of, they'll just replace him with another neoliberal. but I guess it wouldn't hurt to boot him out just to give the neolibs a hard time. All right, and tonight, let me kick a screen over, move this one, but on this one, Colin, it's going to be on the Marianne Williamson, and you can kick into that in your browser. If you go into the Colin app, you can just search for Sabby Sabs, and you'll see that come up here. Let's hit some comments. We got a few comments here. JB Font is saying one of my drugs is around $500 per month. Thank goodness for Medicare Part D. Yeah, I mean the whole, when you're talking about healthcare and the coverages and all this stuff, and the whole thing can be like a mess and ridiculously expensive, and you still haven't even gotten to the prescription drug part of it yet. And big pharma, these some of these drugs and treatments, like the numbers will just pop your eyes out, into the tens of thousands of dollars per dose is a thing, and if you don't have good insurance, you're just not getting it. Thanks for this super chat, David Giltinen. I focus on nutrition, exercise, and vitamin supplements ever since taking the first J&J shot. Nothing beats taking care of yourself. It's scary how few Americans seem to realize this. Cheers, Sabby. Thanks for the super chat, David. Baby Internet was saying about how the ER is how you just get in there and you're just going to be waiting. And saying if your condition isn't near death, you'll be waiting in more than 10 hours in the U.S. emergency departments these days. I know it's pretty ridiculous. They talk about Canada and rationing and whatnot. And it's like we got a lot of rationing here in the U.S. The Oracle Delphi said, well, if the care is so bad, why are U.S. citizens always trying to go there for services? And it's true. You see plenty of that. You had that famous case with Rand Paul going there for his treatment just because it was a really good clinic and it was in Canada, and this idea of the U.S. being this top of the line healthcare. Well, It can be, and it very often is, if you're getting high end care, if you can afford it, if you have access, if you're in a good area, you can get the best care in the world. But if you're missing any of those things, or if you're poor, if you don't have good health insurance, then those things just aren't accurate. When people bring up Medicare for All, one of the things I like to say about it is that Medicare for All is a compromise, a compromise permission, a compromise position. We shouldn't even be demanding that. That shouldn't be I feel like our big demand should be bigger. Our big demand should be a real U.S. national healthcare system that's not nonprofit. And totally get rid of the insurance companies that takes on big pharma, and it's a big project. But if we're going to demand things, we shouldn't be. You don't want to demand compromise, right? You want to be demanding like real stuff. So then the other thing I noticed at one point earlier in the chat that AdKid put in a chat about he described an RCI, a root cause investigation, and sometimes in software we do things similar to they call them an RCA, a root cause analysis, and this is what I try to do sometimes with how what do we do about this mess? What do we make our big demands? What do we how do we fix this? And I feel like if you do a root cause analysis of what's wrong, it always comes back down to the money and the corruption. And so that's why I feel like as a movement, as what we want to be demanding, what we want to be going for, really has to be hitting that, has to be prioritizing that, because if we don't fix that, if we don't get a government that's not totally corrupt and bought out by the big money interests, then everything else is kind of moot, because they're just going to wreck it. So that's my RCA, my root cause analysis.
All right, guys,
we are going into call-in. See you in there. Bye.
Yeah. We're going over to call in. It's time to do the thing. This is episode 94. Marianne confronted by reparations activists. Former congressional candidate Marcel Dixon asked Marianne Williamson to revise her reparations plan amounts and to add cash payments. In a heated discussion, Marianne assessed, what is that? Oh, that's supposed to be accused. That's a typo. Whoops. Marianne accused Marcel of using anti-Semitic tropes. This, you know what? Autocorrect really sucks. I'll fix that. But anyway, let's talk about it. Let's go over to call in. I want to hear your thoughts about this. And do you feel that Marianne has just already lost it for South Carolina? I don't know. We'll see. All right, guys, I'll be back live tomorrow evening. I know Trump was now indicted. I'm sure I'll talk about that either on RBN or on this show. But other than that, have a good night. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. See you over there. Keep up the fight.